So, as you already have been noticing, we are using very, very different methods to somehow try to answer the question, how is social work represented? We have also different ways to enter the topic. So my specific theoretical frame is more from post-colonial theory, which I don't want to explain now because I only have 20 minutes. But so it's post-colonial theory with a very important theoretical frame which comes from post-structuralism. So when we talk about representation, we don't split between reality and fictional, because it's always like mixed up, and you will see that how my analysis is also somehow conduced by this idea. So how did I start to be interested, or how was my entrance into the topic? Actually, for a long time, I'm interested in the representations of refugees. And you know that is a very, very topical issue and matter right now for the whole of Europe, and maybe also globally. And the picture that you see here is actually the logo of the pro-refugee movement in Germany. I think it is also used in other European countries, but I think it was first started, this logo, in Germany, and most of my students wear T-shirts with refugees welcome, so very proudly. And I think it's I have to slow down. And they are like, it's a very, very important movement. So my starting point to see which role actually does social work play in the solidarity with refugees, and how is social work portrayed when we talk about refugee politics in Europe and specific in Germany. The method that I used was critical discourse analysis, which I think was also used by Ria already. And here, using again specifically post-structuralist theory and Michel Foucault. So the idea of discourse not as only the text that is talked about and written about, but how text and the oral word somehow produces also reality and produces also subject. How is the production of the social worker can be read in the text, and how is the production of the refugee with all these images and connotations that we know are still in Europe full of racism. For that matter, I looked at different newspapers, also again from tabloid up to high quality. If you really do an in-depth analysis of the newspaper, you will unfortunately find out that there is no much difference between tabloid and high quality, especially when it comes to things like, for example, refugees. Maybe, the pictures are almost the same, and the words are a little bit more, articulated, but the outcome is almost the same. So a very specific report, which I will recount 5 minutes later, was an incident that happened in Germany and a home for refugees, which somehow triggered the question to have a look, where are the social workers in this case? What did they do in this incident of utter violence, which I will recount? So, but to frame the question first, let us have some numbers. So we can talk nowadays, and in the tabloids and also in the high-quality newspapers, they talk about the refugee crisis of Europe, and they talk about the tragedies that we have to somehow perceive day by day. The number of refugees in Germany indeed has been rising since 2009, which is not that long ago. Before that they were going down. Since 2009 in Germany they are rising, and I think this goes also for the whole of Europe. We now have approximately like 630,000 refugees which live in Germany, and 2,002 or almost 2,000, 3,000 people applied for asylum in Germany only in 2014. But you have to see these are only the applications. Most of the applications are not even approved. I mean, they're just not even considered. So most of them then go into what is called an legality You know that they are like illegalized and illegalized situation in Germany also. Everywhere in Europe, there is no big difference. So it's a European politics that we are talking about. So we're talking about Dublin III. So this is a European convention which, of course, has consequences. And you know that on Sunday itself, there were 17 operations on the coast of Libya, where 5,800 migrants, the press said, were rescued. Actually, they were just, thrown back and deported back to Libya and the African continent. It was actually an Italian and French operation, like 17 operation, and 16 boats were rescued, they said. And we can now talk also about what rescuing means in this matter. So one could say, to quote my partner Nikita, who just wrote a very interesting article on it, that the recent Mediterranean boat disasters are a grim reminder that not only the migrants but also Enlightenment ideals are endangered in post-colonial Europe. What means there are ideals like, for example, the right of free mobility, which, for example, Immanuel Kant already wrote in the 18th century, that we all, as human beings, as being humans, we have the right for free mobility. And he very, very powerfully described that in Perpetual Peace, if you were to read it, 18th century, why we all should be cosmopolitans. And this is also the right for hospitality. You have to be hospitable to people who come and cross the border. These are rights that are like utterly like kicked away, and it's actually the ideas of the Enlightenment. The situation of the refugees are now that not only thousands of them lost their lives in the Mediterranean, and we are talking about thousands. We are not able to name that anymore. And you know that when you are not able to name the death, then actually you lose the position of being a subject. You're only a mass, you're only a number. And we have also the situation in Germany, and it's getting worse also, but not only, but also because of the reports of the media, repeatedly attacked and assault on refugees and on refugee homes. Also in the east of Germany, but also in the west of Germany. Very often people say it's only in the east, but that's not the case. There are attacks all over the country. And we have to, of course, see that there is a significant role here also of gender, race, and class and religion that must be considered. Of course, we have a very, very thorough anti-Muslim resentment in the whole of Europe, which leads to that a lot of refugees attacked are considered to be Muslims. Sometimes they are not, because most of the Europeans can't also differentiate between Muslims and other religions. And you also can't see if somebody is Muslim. I, for example, could be a Muslim, even if my name is Maria. You don't know, so be careful. And of course, most of the media only show pictures mostly of male refugees, which is not the case. We have a lot of female refugees and a lot of children also. And we also know hardly anything about the class of refugees. But we think, and most of the people think, of course, because of the media reports also, that they are all poor and they don't have any qualification, which we know is not the case. A lot of them are highly qualified, but don't have any chance in their countries. So they come and they are professors, they are musicians, they are architects. Actually, there was a brilliant exhibition in Berlin where different refugees chose their professions, and people were so amazed because they all thought they were just poor and hungry in their countries, but this is not the case. So, and what is also reported, and it's very, very important, and you see here a picture of that in front of Brandenburger Tor, that there are a lot of protests by the refugees themselves. So the refugees themselves created a movement which depends on the solidarity, of course, of the citizens, the German citizens, protesting against their treatment and protesting against also something that is called Residenzpflicht in Germany, which means that they are not allowed to leave a certain district as long as the application is being processed, which can be years. So for years, for example, you're not allowed to leave Rome. I mean, this would be horrible, especially in August. So, and that reminds us very much of the ghettos already in the Middle Age, where people with a certain time were not allowed to leave a certain district. And there are a lot of distress, and a lot of refugees went into hunger strike also, but with little outcome. If we look now, and this is what I want to try to show, the link between the representation of the refugees, how are they represented, and the representation of the social work. This is an interesting point here. So I looked not on the representation of the social worker, but the representation of the refugees in between the link, the representation of the social worker. We have three main representations in the media. Can verify maybe also in the Italian media. I don't think that it is very much different. That there are three main patterns in the media. One is the objectification and victimization of the refugee. This is a classical picture, just masses of faces without name, where you sometimes not even see persons anymore, but just the masses. This is the production of an object. And it's on the image level, but it's also how they are described. And of course the victimization, which goes along with what I said before, that we can't imagine them to be, for example, qualified or having another role, another position than being a refugee, which makes them into a victim and into an object. The second pattern is the stratification, and which goes along with the securitization of Europe. You know, the border of Europe is more and more secured, as we know, and most of the refugees are seen as threats, or they are seen as jihadis, all of them, or they are seen as bringing some viruses and bacteria and, you know, like threatening the whole society by bringing certain illness and with them, and hygienic problems with them. And you see very often this kind of pictures. And also where they are received like by astronauts, not by human beings. They're like with white dresses and covered the mouth and all this with the gloves. And you have to imagine what it means also not only to be treated like that, but also to be perceived as that, as a threat, nothing but a threat. And it's only about the security of Europe. That goes, of course, for the role of the representation of migrants. I had this one student, actually very smart student. You know, I heard in 2050 there will be more foreigners in Germany than Germans. And I was like, so what? And he said, yeah, but this is dangerous. He said, why should it be dangerous? There are more and more less Germans, and there are more and more, for example, Indians. Here more Indians, there are less Germans. It's okay, no? Balance again. But this is, of course, not seen like that. And the last point is the criminalization. This is also a very, very typical picture. The pictures are actually very annoying, and I think we should go into the analysis of the images also, and not of the commentaries and text only, because the images, when it comes to refugees, is just devastating. And also the demonization of the refugees. So they're always seen as, again, a threat, but always potentially criminal. Okay, so the incident that happened in 2014, was in September 2014, was the appearance of this picture in the media, which shows actually a security personnel mistreating a refugee in a refugee home. So this happened in a refugee home, but not only that. On top of that, somebody had the nerve to take a photo and place the photo on the internet and send it also to the media. And of course, what we immediately think about is the incident in Abu Ghraib, for example, where prisoners were also mistreated, and they were like taking films and photos. So here you have another also analysis that we have to do. What did the possibility of everything being recorded led to? You know, so that we even have photos of this incident. But again, it's ambivalent. On one hand, we get a glimpse of what is happening, the violence that is happening in these homes. And on the other hand, you see that somebody is representing himself as a hero by putting the foot on the head of a human being. This happened in September 2014. So what I did is not only screen the general patterns of the representation of refugees, but have a look at this incidence and reading and analyzing the newspaper from 27th of September up to 4th of October, and like 7 different newspapers to see how it was reported and how they talked about the role of social work in this incident, because of course in this home there are also social workers. It's not only security officers and people who give them food and things like that, but there are also social workers working there. So what we found is that the social work seems to be absolutely non-existent in this arena. There was absolutely no talk about social work playing any role here. And then I went and had a look at the more broader reports on refugees, and I found out that this seems to be at all the case. That when it is about domestic abuse, the representation might be terrifying, but at least there is a social worker somehow appearing in the scene. When it comes to refugees, there is absolutely no talk about social work. And one of the possibilities of interpreting this particular point is that refugees do not inhabit the same discursive space like migrants, because when we talk about migrants, I'm a migrant myself. You notice Castro Varela is not really a German name. Of course, we have reports where social work also plays a role, consultancy, etc. But when it comes to refugee, no. So it seems to be we have a split here that and shows that when we talk about migrants, it's a completely other discursive space than when we talk about refugees. Refugees are treated simply as a bureaucratic and administrative matter, not as a matter of social work, which is a really important point here. We do some quotes of the media, which actually, and that one has to see also on a positive side, anonymous condemned, of course, the incident in Germany, which I think a lot of people said, so what? But I said, I think it's very important, because you see that the civil society, and the media is part of the civil society, Gramsci, should forget Gramsci, so media is part of the civil society. And we see that the civil society still react to utter violence. They might, represent them as a threat and as objects and so on. But in this case, the civil society works and says this is too much. This should not be happening. And one of the journals, Die Welt, it's rather conservative media, said they do business with the hardship of refugees and skimp on social work. So this was the only comment on social work, showing also that they are not somehow using the potential also of social work here, but only somehow the business, which means that doing business is the contrary than social work, which when you see how much a social worker earns, makes sense somehow. And then they talk about the frustration of the refugees. So, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, a very high-quality, bourgeois, conservative, liberal newspaper, said, what frustrates refugees? And then there was a list, which is interesting because this is not about frustration, it's about violence, what is happening here. And the second is the Berliner Morgenpost, a more liberal newspaper, daily news. The security transforms these homes into prisons. They treat us like people without rights. This was one of the only newspapers where the refugees themselves had a voice. And that's interesting because they mention that these homes are actually transformed into prison. Here an analysis via Michel Foucault makes absolutely sense to show how these total institutions, like if it is psychiatry, if it is prison, and now also the refugee homes, all works with the same logic. And what happened there is that there is a right-free zone, so to say. Now, it is also production of social work being missing here, that means that the human face that comes also with social work is also missing. So if social work is part of civil society and represents, so to say, the human face of the state, because like Schuler said, it's control and it's help, but it's somehow also the human face of the state. You have the politicians who constantly lie to us and things like that. But then you have the human face, which is the social work, which somehow works for the state. You will see that if this is missing, you have a discursive border, like a limit between, which is constituted between who deserve help by the state through social work and those who don't. And indeed, we have much too less social workers being paid working refugee rooms. The main question would here be the one of belonging. Who belongs to us and deserves or has the right to be helped by us, represented by the social worker, and also the entitlement and deserving part of it. By erasing social work from refugee matters, all the matters, refugees are rendered, so would be one of my conclusions, as non-citizens, because only the citizens deserve to be helped by the social worker. Even if they are bad citizens, they are citizens. But refugees are non-citizens, and insofar social work is erased from it. And let me come to my last conclusion by reminding us of a very nice, very important essay, as I like about, by Hannah Arendt, who you know as a Jewish philosopher from Germany. Herself was a refugee, and she wrote this very important little article which was called "We Are Refugees," and wrote, "The community of European peoples went to pieces when and because it allowed its weakest member to be excluded and persecuted." And the persecution means also, to come again to make full round, to be excluded of the position of a citizen, to have the same citizenship rights. That means also the right, for example, to protest. And for us, I think, as social workers, it's very paramount to get visibility again in the issue of refugees, and to show not only solidarity, but I would even say, go so far, to redefine solidarity, to put ourselves in front also of refugees and demand that we also have a responsibility vis-a-vis these subjects, so that they are not rendered, like Butler would say, objects, but subjects again. And here I think it would be very important to do an analysis via Foucault as what she called problematization, which doesn't mean what are the problems, but how and why something becomes a problem. Why did refugees become a problem? For whom and why? Because actually they're also a very productive and important force. And I think to be a critical social worker, we have to again see ourselves as a train in Berlin. I'm sure painted by my students. To become again this critical social worker, this political social worker, which refuses to be limited to just help the ones that the state demands us to help, but also to help the ones who are rendered non-citizen. Thank you.